My name is Jessie Turner. People frequently told me that they couldn't tell whether I was male or female based on my name. I heard that my mother chose a name that would suit me whether I was a boy or a girl. Growing up, I didn't have a father. According to my mother, my father was an alcoholic, a playboy, and someone who did not work much. That's what she says. You can never trust a smooth talker, she used to say. When I was 10 years old, my mother remarried her childhood friend, Isaac, whom she met again at a class reunion. Isaac, who was a physician, always looked extremely busy. Isaac, with his shaggy bedhead, would occasionally read a difficult book alone at home. Whenever my mother tried to talk to him, he would just mumble a few words without making eye contact. I couldn't understand what was so good about Isaac, but my mother used to say, Isaac has always been an honest person. He doesn't even drink. He's not very talkative and a bit timid, but he's a kind person. She said so happily. Perhaps, due to her ex-husband, she stated that it was critical for her partner to have stable employment and not drink. I was happy to see that my mother was more cheerful than before, but I didn't get used to Isaac, who was quiet, and I had no idea what he was thinking. Isaac seemed to be concerned about me, but his attitude was very awkward. According to my mother, you've reached a certain age, and he's not sure how to approach you. Well, 4 years had passed since Isaac came to our family, and we still hardly talked to each other. I couldn't call him Dad, so I always called him Isaac. Jessie, are you playing video games again? Did you do your homework? You're almost a 9th grader. You need to pull yourself together a little bit. My mother would yell at me. Oh, come on, Mom, leave me alone. I closed the door to my room to block out my mother's voice. Go to school. Go to cram school. Get yelled at. Have a fight at school. I didn't have any dreams for the future, and there was nothing in particular that I wanted to do. Some days were delightful, while others were not. I assumed that kind of day would last forever. Then, one day, I'm home! When I came home from school, my mother, who always greeted me with a smile, didn't answer the door. Mom? When I went to the kitchen, I found several onions lying on the floor. I saw her feet behind the kitchen counter. I felt my blood run cold. Mom? I ran over to see my mother lying on the floor, her face contorted in agony. Mom! Mom! I shouted out repeatedly, but she remained limp and unconscious. With trembling hands, I dialed 911. The paramedics arrived and rapidly gave first aid, but they did not transport her immediately. It seemed that there were no hospitals that would accept her. I wondered if all the hospitals were overcrowded. Please, help her quickly! I was really nervous, but time was ticking away. I was worried that it would be too late. I suddenly realized that I had not yet contacted Isaac. I knew I should have called him. I desperately searched for his phone number and contacted him.
Hello?
This is Jessie.
Oh, hey Jessie. What's up?
Isaac sounded surprised and confused. My mom! She collapsed! When I said in a crying voice, Isaac's voice changed drastically.
What did you say? So, where is she right now?
I called an ambulance and she's wearing some kind of oxygen mask, but they aren't taking her anywhere. I don't know what to do.
Don't worry. I'll take care of it. Can you pass me to the paramedic?
Isaac spoke more dependably and briskly than ever. I handed the phone to the paramedic, who appeared to be in a rush. Excuse me?
Yes.
Isaac? No, my dad is a doctor. He said he wants to talk to you. That was the first time I called Isaac Dad. Dad. Yes. Isaac was my dad. I realized that as I said it out loud. The paramedic hurriedly received the phone and talked to Isaac. The ambulance drove off to the hospital where he worked. Thank you, Isaac. When we arrived at the hospital, Isaac was trying desperately to convince the elderly doctor. The older man shook his head.
I've already got 2 operations coming up today. But you have to do something. I'm begging you. I understand how you feel, but I'm about to perform an operation on Senator Parker. I can't change the schedule. Please, please save my wife. Have Andrew handle it. Please, I want you to do it, Dr. Edwards.
Isaac was insisting. I had never seen him like that before. But the elderly doctor, called Dr. Edwards, shook his head and hurried away. Isaac was always mumbling something, and I didn't get him, but I noticed that he really cared about my mother. I could feel it so deeply that even at a time like this, I was touched by it. After her heart examination, my mother needed to have emergency surgery. She was carried away on a stretcher. I was overwhelmed with anxiety, and the time I spent waiting in the waiting room seemed like an eternity. Suddenly, a man in a white coat stood in front of me. I looked up and saw it was Isaac. Without saying a word, he handed me a drink in a paper cup and sat down next to me. I clutched it with both hands and brought it to my mouth. The delicious aroma of coffee and a hint of sweetness filled my mouth. Thank you, I mumbled in a barely audible voice. Isaac spoke to me as if he were also talking to himself.
Dr. Andrew is operating on her right now. He's a young doctor, but he's doing his best. She's gonna be okay, I swear.
We had been sitting side by side for a while when his name got called out. Isaac said,
I'll come back later,
and walked away. As I watched him go, I was so glad that he was there. A few hours later, I heard that my mother's surgery had ended without incident. I fell onto the sofa, relieved from the bottom of my heart. After this incident, the way I looked at Isaac changed. I started to think that I wanted to be a doctor like him. We talked at home a little, more than before, but I still feel embarrassed to call him Dad. When I tried to talk to him, I would say, "Hey," or, "You know what?" I was also somewhat reserved and didn't want to burden him with tuition fees. I thought I had no choice but to go to a national medical school if I wanted to go there. My mother was surprised to see me suddenly start studying. I heard that her heart disease might recur. Isaac said,
If only Dr. Edwards had operated on her, she might have been cured completely.
He was frustrated. Dr. Edwards, who refused to operate on her, was an experienced cardiovascular surgeon. I was worried about the recurrence of my mother's disease, but I was determined to become a great doctor and completely cure her heart. 4 years later, I managed to get into a local medical school and studied hard for 6 years, while working part-time as a private tutor. After college, I lived alone, so I hardly talked to Isaac at all. But he was very happy when he heard that I passed the national exam. After successfully completing the 2-year initial training program, I wanted to become a surgeon, so I decided to apply for the specialty training program at the Central Hospital where Isaac worked. There was a famous cardiovascular surgeon there, Dr. Flores. I sent Isaac an email informing him that I had applied to the Central Hospital and the date of the exam, but he did not respond. I guess he didn't see my email. Maybe he is too busy to reply. Or maybe he doesn't want me to come to the same hospital. Various thoughts crossed my mind. But anyway, I was resolved to give it my best shot. With that in mind, on the day of the interview, I entered the interview room with my heart racing. When I entered the interview room, there were 2 interviewers in white coats, sitting side by side. As soon as they saw me, the doctor with a nameplate that said Wyatt was surprised and said,
What? Are you a woman? You are Jessie, right?
With that, he compared my resume with my face. Yes, that's right. Apparently, he thought I was a man because of the name on my resume.
Wyatt, she has put the check mark on the woman column.
A doctor with the nameplate Logan, who appeared to be his junior, pointed to my resume and whispered to Wyatt. Wyatt looked disappointed.
Darn it. I expected more from you because of your excellent grades, but you were a woman.
He slumped back in his chair. How dare he talk to me like that? And what's up with this attitude? As you can imagine, I was furious. Still, I suppressed my anger and responded calmly and politely. After a few routine questions about my reasons for applying, Wyatt told me,
You know that surgery is a man's job, right? A woman like you wouldn't be able to endure hours of surgery.
Well, I have confidence in my physical strength and dexterity. Wyatt ignored my comment.
Women quit quickly after getting married or having a baby. You know what I'm talking about? It's annoying.
He shrugged his shoulders lazily. I will try not to be a nuisance to you. I would also like to contribute to the development of a system that would allow me to continue working in such conditions. I have some ideas for that. Wyatt interrupted me arrogantly and said,
Huh? Who the hell do you think you are? Anyway, our hospital doesn't need women. I've had to let go of every woman who was mistakenly hired here.
Logan glanced at Wyatt with a stern look on his face as he said this. Wyatt noticed that and said,
Well, I made them quit because of their bad working attitudes.
He quickly made an excuse.
So, that's all I have to say. You've wasted your time.
Please, wait a minute. I really want to train under Dr. Flores in cardiovascular surgery.
Didn't you hear me? We don't need a woman like you. That will be it.
Wyatt quickly closed the file. It was so frustrating. It was clearly sexist. The hospital didn't need women. Is that why Isaac didn't respond? Tears welled up in my eyes with anger. I've studied every day, even when I didn't have time to sleep. I went through rigorous clinical training that only allowed for a few days of good relaxation over 2 years. I learned about various diseases and treatments by looking at senior doctors' charts at night. I even worked till after midnight putting materials in envelopes for academic conferences. There were days when I worked like a lunatic, but I overcame these obstacles for the sake of my dream. Even though I worked so hard, I was being discriminated against just because I was a woman. I was so frustrated that tears welled up in my eyes. But I knew I should never cry in front of someone like him. I bit my lip. At that moment, the door opened.
Oh, Director?
Wyatt, who had been reclining back against the chair with his arms folded, quickly elevated his body and sat back down. Logan, who had been sitting with his face down next to him, also looked up. When I turned around, I saw Isaac, an elderly man in a white coat, standing there.
Oh, there you are.
Seeing my face, he smiled at me. Isaac?
I just saw your emails. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize them at all. I just got back from a business trip. I heard from your mother that you were having an interview at our hospital today. I rushed to check my spam folder and found it full of emails from you.
Hearing that, I was relieved and ashamed of myself for having doubted Isaac even for a moment. Wyatt looked at me and Isaac and turned pale.
May I ask, what is your relationship with her? Jessie is my daughter.
Wyatt's mouth dropped open.
My secretary Jane told me you were interviewing her in this room. How did it go?
I said to Isaac, who knew nothing about what happened. I heard this hospital doesn't hire women.
Excuse me?
Isaac's mild-mannered face turned stern.
What do you mean? Wyatt?
Wyatt was in a panic.
No, I didn't say that. You know about our plan to increase the number of female workers, don't you? Oh, well... And yet, not only is the number of female employees declining, but they are leaving as soon as they arrive. I thought it was strange, but explain to me what's going on. There seems to be some kind of misunderstanding. I only said that there are many women who would quit.
I suppressed my anger and told Isaac. He said that this hospital doesn't need female workers. He also said that he made female workers who came to work quit.
What did you say?
Isaac became even angrier. Wyatt panicked.
No, I didn't say that.
He was flustered. I continued. He also said he didn't want a woman like me in the hospital.
I was only joking. I would never say such a thing.
Isaac yelled at Wyatt, who was completely distraught.
Are you saying that my daughter is a liar? No, that's not what I meant. It's just that... Hey, Logan, I never said such a thing, right? Yes, you did.
Logan said, looking away from Wyatt. Isaac, more furious than I've ever seen him before, said to Wyatt, who was pale.
How dare you, a doctor who is in charge of people's lives. I'll have the audit committee analyze the past employment applications and the grounds for their resignation. You better get ready for this.
Wyatt was ultimately disciplined after being exposed for multiple instances of power harassment, sexual harassment, and non-compliance. I, on the other hand, was eventually hired by Central Hospital. But I didn't want people to think that because I was the director's daughter, I was getting special treatment. I was competitive and wanted to be recognized for my skills, so I followed Dr. Flores' lead and worked harder than anyone else. To be honest, it was physically demanding, and there were many times I felt like I was going to give up. But what kept me going was my commitment to fully heal my mother, no matter what it took. And whenever I remembered what Wyatt said on the day of the interview,
a woman like you can't handle this, can you?
I was more determined not to give up. Little by little, my achievements began to pile up. At the same time, I asked the director to improve the working environment. I asked him to improve the duty room and shower room, which were designed to be used only by men. I also requested him to open an in-house daycare center so that female employees could work, even if they had children. Normally, it would have been difficult to achieve such a thing. There are still many hospitals in the world that do not have such an environment. The reason these things were accepted so easily was because I was the daughter of the hospital director. I can only say that I was really lucky in that respect. I am truly grateful to the director. The number of female doctors gradually increased at the hospital. The number of patients who wished to visit a female doctor grew, particularly in obstetrics, gynecology, and urology. 10 years later, my mother was going to have heart bypass surgery. In the waiting room, Logan spoke to me.
Are you sure you are going to do this?
Yes, I am.
Are you sure?
There's no rule against operating on your relatives, right?
Yes, but can you keep your cool? That's the biggest problem.
I've worked so hard to heal my mother's heart. Let me do it.
If you insist that much, I understand. With Dr. Flores retired, you're the most experienced surgeon in this hospital now.
I'll make sure it succeeds, I said firmly.
Good luck.
Logan nodded. The day of surgery. After 6 hours of surgery, I walked out of the operating room. In front of me was Isaac in his white coat. I gave him a thumbs up, and he beamed with relief.
You did a good job.
Isaac and I were holding a cup of coffee with the same flavor as the one we had back then on the rooftop. We were talking about the day my mother fainted and was taken to the hospital.
Back then, I never thought we'd end up working in the same hospital like this.
Seeing how desperately you asked the surgeon to operate on her then made me want to be a doctor someday too, and fix Mom's heart.
I see. I could never forget that day, when you called me Dad for the first time in front of the paramedic.
I couldn't help but look at Isaac's face.
At that moment, I thought that I would definitely protect you as well as your mother.
The solemn look on Isaac's eyes touched my heart. Even after what happened to my mother, I was too embarrassed to call Isaac Dad for a long time. I've called him director ever since I started working. I took a deep breath and looked at Isaac. Thank you, Dad. Isaac looked at me in surprise. The reason I've been able to do my best is because you've been there for me. I've always been grateful to you. He laughed, tears streaming down his face as he looked at me. Hey, why don't we all go to the beach once Mom comes out of the hospital?
Oh, that sounds great. It's been a long time since I've been on vacation.
He replied, still crying. I couldn't believe he was such a crybaby. I looked up at the sky above the rooftop with my dad. A flock of birds was flying high in the clear sky.